We're getting ready to colonize Mars, neuroscientist Sam Harris recently said. And yet, we still can't agree on what would be healthy food to take on the trip. Is Harris right? Do we really not agree on what food is healthy? Hey, I'm Justin, and for the next 15 minutes, I'll relay to you what the last 15 years of study and self-experimentation has taught me about diet and behavior. If you're having diet problems, you're likely caught in one of three thorny issues. I call them knowing, doing, and becoming. Knowing is about figuring out what to eat. On the one hand, Harris has a point. I mean, there's a new diet every year, 9 milk alternatives when you go to the supermarket. I mean, are eggs good or bad? It seems that no one can agree, right? But this, as I'll show, is an illusion, albeit a convincing one. The experts, the real ones, mostly agree on what's healthy. But look, even if we solve Harris's Martian problem, knowing what to eat and actually getting yourself to eat it are two very different things, right? Sure, you may get pumped up after watching the Game Changers or What the Health and swear off eating meat for maybe a week, but it's much harder to do that for an entire year, let alone 50. So step 2 is about figuring out how to get yourself to eat healthy consistently. And then finally, step 3, becoming. Because it isn't merely about tricking yourself into doing health. It's about turning into the type of person who actually prefers the healthy choice. Now, I'm not pitching a diet here. What's important is not which diet is best, but how to think best about diets. I've spent a decade thinking about diet. I've read over 100 books on health and behavior, read scores of scientific papers, and taken courses on physiology and applied nutrition and statistics. I don't get out much. And then I have applied these things to myself, trying out various tactics and diets and measuring the results. Using this research and self-experimentation, I'll supply you practical tools you can use on your way to enduring health, on the way to what I call becoming Foodwise. We start with knowing. How do we know what to eat? What foods are actually healthy? To understand that, we have to seek out the right kinds of experts. Let's get to it. So, from whom do you get your nutrition advice? Let me list a couple options for you, and you tell me which people you recognize. I'll split them into 2 groups. First group, Dr. Barbara Schneemann, anyone? Walter Willett? Frank Hugh? Likely not. Okay, how about group number 2? Dr. Atkins, Tim Ferriss, Dr. Oz, Gwyneth Paltrow, Tom Brady, Deepak Chopra. Okay, obviously you probably knew most of the people from group number 2 and none from group number 1. From now on, we'll call the no-names in group number 1 the nerds and the celebrities in group number 2 the newsies. Understanding the difference is the key to knowing. So the newsies spread the nutritional news. They're not only the famous diet writers and celebrity doctors, but our own doctors, trainers, friends. They're expert communicators, excellent at getting us information in ways we can understand. But they have a drawback too. It's that they don't quite have the knowledge of the nerds. The nerds are the people wearing white coats and carrying Bunsen burners. They're the ones actually doing research, teaching at universities, running laboratories. So ideally we'd get our information straight from them, but they have their own drawback. They're insufferable. Have you ever actually read an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine? It's about as interesting as a dictionary and as accessible as quantum physics. So instead of trying to decipher the nerds, we depend on the newsies, but they tend to warp the message. It's sort of like the childhood game telephone. The first kid starts out with one message, and by the time it gets through 12 immature, wacky minds, it comes out as something completely different. So how do we get both, the right information and the understanding? Well, the best path is to look for groups of experts working together. Nutritional cyborg organizations where the newsies report directly on nerd findings. Take popular diets, for instance. Every year there's a new one, paleo, keto, vegan, but which one is right? Well, for the past decade, the nerds have been ranking these diets in terms of evidence-based health. And guess what they found? Of over 40 diets analyzed yearly, the ones you've heard of all rank in the bottom 20% in terms of health. But on a positive note, the top ranked diets, the DASH diet, the flexitarian diet, the Mediterranean diet, they basically share the exact same dietary elements. And it's not just diets. These foods are the same ones recommended by respected health bodies around the world, like the World Health Organization, the American Heart Association, even NASA. foods. Same foods to eat, same foods to avoid. Okay, so what are the foods? Basically, every credible, nerd-backed organization suggests basing your diet on daily portions of fruits, veggies, whole grains, beans, and nuts. There's a good way to capture this list visually: a traffic light. Remember those old school 2-bulb traffic lights? Green means go and red means stop. Well, think of the consensus healthiest foods as the green light, virtually as much as you want of the fruits, veggies, whole grains, and the rest. Now, there's also nerd consensus on the least healthy foods. The same organizations all say to avoid table sugar, processed snacks, grains, trans and saturated fat, and alcohol. These foods are represented by the red light, right? So pretty simple then, green means go and red means stop. But you may have noticed there are a lot of foods not mentioned at all. So what do we do with those foods? Here, even the nerds can't help us. I call this area the gray area. So some experts recommend dairy, others don't. Some allow for moderate amounts of meat, while others don't even mention it. Same for soy, wheat, eggs, oil, wine. The research in this area is uncertain, and the nerds are split. Large reviews of the science tend to conclude we need more information. So how do we approach the gray area? Be cautious and decide for yourself. If we go back to the traffic light, we can complete the analogy. Most of the time, the traffic light is working fine. Green means go, red means stop. But occasionally, the light starts blinking or turns off completely. So in those cases, we need to be cautious, look both ways, and then decide for yourself when or if you're going to move. When it comes to grays, you basically have 3 choices. You can avoid them, experiment, or take a chance. By avoid, I mean that you can abstain from these foods until the nerds reach a consensus. If you want to experiment, choose one gray at a time and then eat it and measure what happens to your body. This takes much more effort, but you'll find what works for you much faster. And the third option is to chance it. Just say to hell with it and risk that a gray is not in fact a red. The choice is up to you. But as I said, it's one thing to know what to do, and it's quite another to actually do it. For that, let's get to part 2, do. Okay, so fruits and veggies are healthy and sugar isn't. You might be thinking to yourself, well, I already knew that. And that's exactly the point. I mean, we all know exercise is important. We all know getting 8 hours of sleep is better than 5. And we all know we should call our mothers more. But do we get an hour on the treadmill each day and 8 in bed each night? No. And if you're anything like me, you probably haven't called your mother in days. So how do we get ourselves to do what we know is right? Well, there's a branch of social science dedicated to this very problem. It's called behavioral science. What these nerds noticed was that even when we know the right thing to do, we have trouble doing it. On the bright side, by creating certain practices, we can correct for our unconscious errors. That's what doing's about. I'll share 2 of the most evidence-based tactics. And the first one has to do with creating a healthy environment. So in the early 2000s, Google wanted to improve the health of their workers. And after exhausting a list of traditional options, it was one tiny environmental tweak that led to startling results. In the previous years, unhealthy snacks like cookies and candy lined the countertops in prominent places, while the healthier fruits and veggies were harder to see. So the Google executives simply reversed this, placing the carrots, hummus, apples in large eye-level bowls, and demoting the cookies and candy down below. So what happened? Well, almost overnight, Google employees increased fruit and veggie consumption over 30% and decreased unhealthy by the same margin, and these percentages held. Decades of science have proved out this point. The key factor is this: you eat what you see. You can do the same thing as Google with your kitchen or office, your personal environment. How? Well, 2 steps. You see the good and hide the bad. By seeing the good, I mean promoting fruits and veggies to eye-level containers, and by hiding the bad, I mean relegating cookies and candy to the backstage. As they say, out of sight, out of stomach. Moves us to tactic number 2, find a friend. So you might know Penn Jillette as the larger half of the magic duo Penn and Teller. He's sawed many an audience member in half, but his greatest trick was cutting himself in half. He lost 100 pounds in a matter of months, and he kept it off for 6 years. How'd he do it? with a little help from his friends. One of the strongest findings in behavioral research history is that you are who you spend time with. Ken used this power to help turn his health around. He hired a diet coach. His wife supported him by cooking plant-powered meals, and some of his friends even joined him on this crazy health quest. To be Foodwise, you should leverage the power of the people around you. If you live with someone, get them on board. If that's not possible, hire a coach to hold you accountable. And if that isn't possible, find a community, a group of people trying to get and stay healthy. The bottom line, find a way to share your health commitment with other people and give them the authority to hold you accountable. Okay, so now we know what to eat and we have some tools to start doing it. But there's one last problem to solve. How do we become the type of person who doesn't need tricks? How do we become Foodwise? So we all know those people at one time or another who have done health. Maybe it was you. You made a resolution and ate salads and took spinning classes all winter, dropping 10, 20 pounds in the process. But then something happened. You got married, you had a kid, you changed jobs, you moved, or I don't know, a pandemic hit. Now you haven't seen a kettlebell or a Brussels sprout in months. But how did you lose your healthy habit? So the trick to doing is sort of fooling yourself into eating healthy. The employees at Google weren't intent on eating healthy. Big brother Google changed the environment. And when you find a coach or community, what you're really doing is finding someone to do the work that you can't do yourself. It's all external. This is fine while times are good, but as many of us saw over the course of 2020, when your stable environment is shaken, your hard-won habits tend to falter. What the researchers find in everything from diet to enduring artists and scientists, from businesses to empires, is that those who endure not only change their external environment, but also examine and intently overhaul their internal selves. It's not about getting themselves to do health. It's about becoming the types of people who prefer it. With respect to diet, the two most important levers for becoming are commitment and purpose. So perhaps no one has done more to promote the idea of health in America than Michelle Obama. She's turned the White House lawn into a produce-producing garden, inviting school children there in order to spread the value of healthy eating. But many don't know that Michelle had her own health struggle, and it all hit an inflection point around 2005. She knew the value of exercise and diet, but with 2 young kids and an executive role at a major hospital, her healthy habits had faded. She didn't even notice it until problems sprung up between her and Barack and they sought help. It took counseling and self-reflection to realize the problem. She was physically exhausted and emotionally drained. She was unhappy. This was my pivot point, she wrote in her memoir. For starters, I recommitted myself to being healthy. Having children had drastically changed her routine, and that breakneck routine led to her dejection. Now she would have to adjust in a big way. She would need to commit. She didn't do it alone. Like Penn Jillette, she got help, scheduling a trainer for 5 a.m. workouts and having a friend meet her and having her loving mother watch the kids. But what's crucial, what started it all and what we all need to do to become Foodwise is that she first made that commitment to herself. Quote, "This new regimen changed everything. Calmness and strength, 2 things I feared I was losing, were now back." Michelle Obama made a commitment. But she also had something else we need to become Foodwise. She had a purpose. So in 2017, Simon Cowell was rushed to the hospital. Due to heart issues, Cowell had passed out while walking down the stairs, suffering a concussion on the way down. The doctor told him he had to change, or next time the damage could be permanent. He recommended a plant-based diet, which was the opposite of what Cowell's eating habits were before the fall. Cowell made a change though, the next day, and he hasn't looked back since. Well, how did he make such a major change without much struggle? He found a purpose. "It's easier than you think," Cowell said, "because my son Eric is 5 right now, and if I didn't sort myself out physically, I wouldn't be able to catch up. Ultimately," he said, "all he needs to do is to think about his son, and the eating part takes care of itself." This is purpose, and this is becoming. Though all of us at any given moment can be attracted to the red lights of croissants and pizzas, it's not hard to abstain when we recall our reason for why we want to be healthy, whether it's your work, your partner, or as in Cal's case, your kids. As Simon says, you have to know why you're doing this, and you have to make that connection over and over, especially when things get difficult. And this brings us full circle. Look, many of us know we should eat healthy, but before we know it, we're like Michelle Obama, running from one thing to the next, forgetting to nurture and prioritize the very thing that makes it all possible, our personal health. And even when we make that commitment to health, it tends to be for short-sighted, superficial purposes. And those reasons, research has shown, will not be enough when things get very hard. With that, allow me to conclude with the single most important insight I've gained with regard to diet over the past decade. And it's about what diet is for. Diet is perhaps the most underrated tool we have to improve our lives. And I mean beyond mere weight loss or defense against disease. It's about the immediate and long-term function of your brain. Eat a broccoli and blueberry salad instead of that slice of pizza at lunch, and your focus, memory, cognitive function will be better. Not in a decade, but by dinner. You'll also be less anxious, less prone to sickness. You'll feel more vital, yes, but it's better than that. You'll actually be more vital, a better version of yourself. So what's diet for? It's for becoming the best you, to show up for the things that you care about, your work, your friendships, and your family. I'm not saying that kale is more important than your kids, okay? But I am saying that eating kale will give you the energy and emotional fortitude to become a better parent. And that's what's important. Okay, that's a lot. We know, we can do, and we can become. But where to begin? First, no. Go on green lights, limit the reds, and with grays, make your own call. Second, do. Like Google, create a healthy environment. And like Penn Jillette, get a little help from your friends. And third, decide what's important to you. Like Michelle Obama, recommit to your personal health. And like Simon, know why. Remember what healthy eating is really for and reinforce it over and over. That's how you become Foodwise. Thank you.